Today, we are going to look at essay number 2. Last week, it was argument essay. Today, we are going to look at essay number 2, which is rhetorical analysis. But before you can do that, there are certain things that you need to know. So I'm going to give you a file, okay? I want you to read it so that you get a better understanding of what this particular kind of essay is all about, okay? So we keep the file there for now. So let me just tell you what this is about in short. In rhetorical analysis, which is essay number 2, you are expected to read, okay, an excerpt that is taken from someone else's speech or article, but usually a speech. And you have to read that excerpt and make a note of all the devices, rhetorical devices used by the speaker. Now, rhetorical devices are particular techniques, literary techniques used by the speaker to persuade their audience. It's used for multiple purposes, but the whole idea, the purpose behind it is to convince the reader, okay, or the listener, to convince them of the validity of their position. Yes. So then what you have to do in your essay is you have to analyze what devices the author has used and why has the author used it, what the purpose is behind it. But in order to do that, you yourself will first have to analyze a lot of other things. Like, for instance, what is the voice of the speaker? Is the purpose of the speaker to inspire, to educate? Okay. And then you have to try and guess who the main readers of such an article would be. Who do you think the audience is being targeted by the speaker? Okay. Are they professionals? Are they students? Are they old people? Are they youngsters? It can be anything. So it would be far easier for you to analyze the purpose of the literary techniques used by the author if you know these things. Okay.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to literary devices, there are certain categories into which the bulk of literary devices fall into. Okay. Some of them are stuff like appeals to emotion. There are many types of appeals to emotion. Okay. There is appeal to identity. There is appeal to logical reasoning. There is arguments from authority. These are four of the main categories. Then there is word choice. So all that has been given in that file next, that I've given you just now. But underneath those headings, you will see I've written down certain words that underneath the bold titles, those words, those points that you see there in the first page, they are examples of the analysis you will use when you write your essay. Okay, I'll give you an example of a thesis sentence, just a random thesis sentence, so that you get some kind of idea. Okay, so pay close attention as we go through it together. The first one is about word choice. Okay, this has a lot to do with vocabulary as well as sentence construction. All right, are you there, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the examples of word choice, you can take it down, is diction. So write it down, diction, D-I-C-T-I-O-N. An example for diction, what it actually means is, do you see point number 2? Characterizing a subject or topic in a particular way. And number 3, associating positive or negative connotations with something. Those two are examples of diction, okay? As is setting the tone, number 4. You see that?
Yes.
And the first one is, of course, imagery. I'm pretty sure you know what imagery is, right? When you use descriptive words, especially in novels and such, people use descriptive words to create a visual image in the minds of the reader.
Sorry, where is that?
Right at the beginning, evoking emotions or images.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so that's what word choice means. The next one, very often used device, statistics and data. I'm pretty sure you know what that is, right?
Yeah.
So this is an example of logical reasoning. Look at the example of the thesis sentence I put for you in the chat. You see that part about the last one, sound logical reasoning?
Yes.
So one type of logical reasoning is made using statistics and data. Okay, they are a very commonly used literary device. They're used to indicate problems, and it's often hard to argue against a fact when it's supported by data. Okay, when numbers are used, people tend to think of those facts as facts, not opinions. All right, and it's pretty hard to argue against facts. And at the same time, it also makes the author appear well read. Do you understand? It makes it appear as if the author does know what they're talking about, that their opinions are based on facts, not mere conjured up elements of fantasy. Okay?
Yeah.
Next, appeal to authority. Now, this you'll find is also commonly used, and it is usually done by using extremely reputable sources to make a statement that was made by those sources, and you use the author uses that in their article to state a position. So it can be stats from a particular organization, it can be merely a quote, a spoken sentence, but they are basically relying on the reputation of the source in order to justify the claim. Okay? The purpose for typical appeals to authority is one, it raises the credibility of the author because the author is now banking on the high reputation of the source that he has used. So automatically, that reputation of the source also transfers to that of the author. So now, when the reader sees that the author has used highly reputable sources, they will also begin to assume that then this author is even more credible and reliable. Okay?
Okay.
It increases the trust the reader will have towards that author. And it also increases the chances for the reader then to agree with the author on other issues as well. Okay? So imagine if the author uses strong arguments from authority right at the beginning of his speech or article. So what happens then is then people will begin to think, okay, everything else that the author says is similarly reliable and credible as well.
Does this work the other way too? So that if you don't write like with very good appeal to authority in the beginning, the end, like you won't believe as much?
No, that's not necessary. This is a device that is used for this purpose. Just because you don't use this device, it doesn't mean that you don't get that benefit. There are other means to achieve this purpose.
Okay.
Okay. For instance, you can use statistics and data to achieve the same effect too.
Yeah.
Okay. Imagine the person has used a lot of facts right at the beginning. So the first impression that the reader would get would be that this author is intelligent. Now, you tend to rely and respect the opinion of someone intelligent. You tend to be more trusting of opinions that come from intelligent people. So, right at the beginning, if readers feel that, okay, this author is intelligent, so he does know what he's talking about. So that means whatever he says could be true. See how that works?
Yes.
Okay. So that was appeal to authority. Next, I already told you about this in the last class, it's concessions. Remember what you used in the homework too, the last body paragraph?
Yeah.
So in the case of speakers too, they can use this particular device, acknowledging that there is an opposite side to this particular issue, and then countering it with counter arguments. This makes their own arguments seem much stronger, and readers tend, again, to give more credence to the argument made by the speaker. Okay?
Okay.
The next one is an example of logical reasoning. It's called Analogies and Comparisons. So, like I put in the thesis sentence, sound logical reasoning. Now, this means that when you can show an example or a hypothetical example of the same principle applying in another situation. That's called analogies. Okay? It helps the reader to better understand the problem at hand. You know what analogies are, right?
Yeah. It was on the SSAT.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, you're right. So that's another method authors typically use to convince their readers by using analogies. So the next one, anecdote. Anecdote simply means any example, okay? Now the example needn't be, it could be an exception to a rule. It can be an example of the rule too. It can also be an example for an exception to a rule. It depends on how the speaker uses it. But anecdotes are often very useful in getting emotional responses from the reader. So these were a particular kind of literary devices. And now I want you to read the rest of it. Rhetorical questions, hypothetical situations appeal to identity. Now to read through the rest, still logos. To the next page. On page number 2, you'll see a word called logos there, one of the subtitles. I want you to read till there and tell me if there is anything that you don't understand. You finish reading?
Yeah. And what is the difference between research or studies and appeal to authority?
You can simply mention a source, okay, that did a study, and you can say that this was the result of the study, the research. When you mention the name of the source and the source is sufficiently powerful, only then does it become an argument from authority.
Okay.
If you simply use the study that was conducted by them, and it is some random research organization without a great reputation, then there's no question of an argument from authority coming there.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then if, say, you use like an uncredible source, does that become detrimental to your writing? Say like Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is never used. It is never used as a source. You never mention Wikipedia. It carries no weight. But on the other hand, you will find that in certain cases, even in Wikipedia, they have sources that are used by the original writer in the article, and they often use it as footnotes. When you go under those references, you'll find that they're often really reputable sources. So if you want to use sources, you can use those, but it doesn't apply in this case. You will not be using it in your essays here.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you finished reading up to logos?
Yes.
Okay. Now, typically, rhetoric in English is divided into 3 types. There are logos, ethos, and pathos. Okay. Logos, as you can understand from the word, it deals with logical reasoning. So all forms of logical reasoning can be categorized as logos.